Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. Those were the last words anyone heard me say out loud. They kept them in my own language because no one who heard them could stand to translate them. The men standing close enough to hear me thought I was calling for the prophet Elijah. I was not. I was saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? I am Yeshua of Nazareth, and I want you to understand what it means that a man can spend his whole life telling people that God is a father who hears them, and then die saying that. Everything you have of me was written by frightened men, from memory, decades after I was dead. Fishermen, a former tax collector, men who ran the night it mattered, and then spent the rest of their lives trying to get my sentences right, which is the only reason that cry survived. I was not there to soften it. No one could ask me what I really meant. They had to leave it exactly as it came out of me. The most damaging sentence in their entire account, kept in a language most of their readers could not even read. So understand what this letter is. It is the one voice here that never chose to be a voice. And I am going to tell you how a man arrives at that sentence, because that is the part you actually need. I am writing to you from the ground. My face is in the dirt. My hands are flat on either side of my head. There is a garden across the valley the city lights don't reach, and it has a name that is not romantic. Gethsemane. It means oil press. It is a work yard. Olives go into a basin cut from the rock, and a stone wheel is rolled over them until the pits crack and the first oil runs clean. Then the pulp is packed, stacked, weighted with stone, pressed a second time, and a third. What comes out last is dark and bitter, fit only for burning. I watched men do this since I was a boy. I know how many times a thing has to be pressed before there is nothing left inside it. Tonight the press is me, so let me show you the 3 pressings that ended in that cry. I went home to Nazareth. You should know what Nazareth was. Not a city, a cluster of stone houses on a hillside. A few hundred people, all of whom knew each other's grandfathers. I learned to walk on that dirt. Men in that room had watched me do it. They handed me the scroll, because I was the local boy who had made a name. I read the old promise aloud. Good news for the poor, freedom for the ones who are held. Then I rolled it shut and said, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. The first thing on their faces was not anger. It was embarrassment. The kind you feel for someone. Isn't this the builder's son? We know his mother. His brothers live at the end of the row. Who does he think he became? And I told them the truest sentence I know about human beings. No prophet is accepted in his own hometown. They did not clap. They took me out to the ridge where the ground drops away, and they meant to throw me off it. I walked out. I never slept in that village again. Here is the lesson, and it is not gentle. The people who knew you as a child are often the last ones who will let you become anything else. They have already decided who you are. Growth, to them, looks like arrogance. Sometimes the first thing the world takes from you is your own front door. I want to be honest about why. It was not the words. Rome's taxes had pulled the grain out of their children's hands, and word had spread that I could put bread back into them. A man who feeds you is worth a full day's walk. Understand their hunger. I do not condemn it. I would have come for bread too. But one morning I looked at that crowd and said the thing that emptied the hillside. You are looking for me not because you saw signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. They wanted to make me king by force. They wanted the soldiers face down in the dust and their grain back in their barns. I understood the wish. I refused the crown. So I began saying things a crowd cannot cheer for. That a man who tries to save his life will lose it. That following me would cost them their households, their comfort, the warm middle of their lives. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. They did not argue. They just drifted off the hill in 2s and 3s, the way people leave a market at dusk. The hill became a hill again. The lesson: the crowd will love you as long as you feed the appetite they already have. The moment you ask them to change what they want, they will not fight you. They will simply leave. And you have to decide, on an emptying hillside, whether the thing you carry is worth being alone with. There are 11 men on the slope behind me. There should be 12. One took a road I already know the end of. Of the 11, I asked 3 to stay awake with me, not to fight, not to understand, only to stay conscious while I went into the dark. They fell asleep. Fear makes men tired, and the meal was heavy. I came back and found them breathing slow, and I said, "Could you not keep watch with me 1 hour?" Then I went back alone, and I told them, and they wrote it down, though it made me look weak, exactly how I felt. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow, to the point of death. You have been taught that I walked toward the end with my head up. Someone wanted you to see that. But here is what happened on the ground. I did not use a temple word for God. I used the word a child uses in a dark house, feeling along the wall for his father. Abba. The men kept it in my own language, because they could not bring themselves to translate it. And I asked, plainly, out loud, "Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me." I knew what the cup was. I had seen the roads after a rebellion. I knew what Roman metal does to the bones of a human foot. Slowly, in front of people who knew you when you were small. The old accounts say my sweat came like drops of blood. Even the men writing it were not certain, and I will not pretend to be, but I will tell you the part they were certain of. I asked 3 times, and the wind sounded exactly the same after I finished as it had before. I began. No voice, no hand on my shoulder, just the damp earth, and the sound of a city across the valley that did not know my name tonight. The answer was no. That is the worst of it. Not the wood, not the metal. It is being certain that someone is listening, and hearing nothing come back, and that silence did not break. It followed me out of the garden, through the questioning, up the hill, into the daylight, and it was still there at the 9th hour, when I stopped calling him Abba, and started shouting into it in the language of my childhood. Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. That is where the first sentence of this letter came from. Not from despair at the end of a bad day. From a man who had asked and asked and asked, and been answered with wind. I am nearly out of time, so I will speak to you directly, the way this channel promised I would. You have a Nazareth, people who cannot forgive you for trying to become more than the child they remember. You have an emptying hillside, the morning you realized the crowd was only ever there for the loaves, and the cold had stayed after they left. And you have this garden, the night you are face down asking for the diagnosis to be wrong, the door to open, the words to be unsaid, and the only answer is wind in the leaves. I am not going to tell you the cup will pass. Mine did not. I am not going to promise the sky will answer. Mine was silent to the last breath, and I said so out loud, in front of everyone, and they wrote it down. Here is the only thing I have that is worth sending. I did not write my own story, so I could not clean it up. I could not delete the night I begged to be let out of it, or the hour I accused God of leaving. The frightened men kept it all in. The fear, the sweat, the Abba, the sleeping friends, the silence, the cry. Because one day you would be on your own floor in the dark, and you would need to know that the silence you are hearing is not proof that you are weak, or alone, or wrong. It is only proof that you are standing where I stood. I asked to be let go. I meant it. Letters from the abyss. Whew.